Work very well. On House Bill 3333. And we have some members on that bill, yes? Why don't the members come forward, and anyone you want to, oh yes, and the member of the lower chamber is here as well.
Mr. Chair, you got to beat up somebody, so the lower
That's
chair's
correct.
got to come over too.
Thank you. You gentlemen do understand why I say that. When the fire occurred in the governor's office in the middle of the building, the water flowed downhill from there toward the Senate chamber. Mazen.
Chair Bernhardt, members of the committee, House Bill 3333 basically directs the Investment Council, this is the Oregon Investment Council, and the State Treasurer to ensure that the investment funds that they're under their control and where they invest it, that they will not be invested in a company doing business with Iran. This is the Islamic Republic of Iran.
All right. Well, we have an august panel. Please, whatever order you'd like to go in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, good morning. Thank you for your time, consideration, and support for House Bill 3333. I'm State Representative Jim Weidner, House District 24, most of Yamhill County and some of Polk County, and I'm proud to have my senator sitting here beside me. Members of the House Committee on Revenue, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning to further explain the importance and intent behind House Bill 3333. This bill is a combined effort from a variety of organizations and has a bipartisan support. We have some great testimonies lined up, so I will just highlight some of the points that you will hear about this morning and offer my opinion on House Bill 3333. House Bill 3333 would work to divest Oregon public employee retirement funds from companies that invest in the Iranian energy sector. As of September 2009, OPERF funds have invested $250 million in companies involved with 9 different Iranian oil companies. Since 2008, these stocks have performed poorly due to Iran's continued move towards nuclear technology and threat of weaponry. Not only should OIC divest because of the...
Excuse me just a moment, Representative. We've just been handed, that as the Dash 1. Is that something you're familiar with?
Yes, the Dash 1s, they're not quite as tight. I was trying to divest from everything. The Dash 1s actually focus on the energy sector. So,
I see. So you're speaking...
I'm speaking on the Dash 1s.
You are? Okay. Thank you. As long as that's clear. Thank you. Please go ahead.
So that comes with work with the different organizations, the Treasurer's Office, putting everything together. So everything we'll be addressing today will be the Dash 1s because that's been a collaborative effort to bring the Dash 1s together. So
thank you. That's very helpful.
So when I was in attendance at the APAC dinner in Portland earlier this year, I listened to Congressman Peter DeFazio as a guest speaker. He passionately spoke of his support of H.R. 2194, the Federal Comprehensive Iranian Sanctions Accountability and Divestment Act, which Congressman DeFazio was a co-sponsor of and became law in July of 2010. He remarked about Oregon's forward-thinking tradition, humanitarian perspective, and how he was in complete support of Oregon quickly divesting from companies that do business in Iran. Just earlier this month, a secret nuclear facility was disclosed by another government dissident because the IAEA has been unable to fully investigate into the totality of the nuclear program in Iran. This bill is all the more urgent. Colleagues, I have passionately pursued this moment because the Iranian government has engaged in brazen and vulgar anti-Semitism, continued belligerent warmongering rhetoric by Ahmadinejad, and has known connections with Hamas and Hezbollah, who are responsible for the deaths of many Americans and even Oregonians serving overseas. Let's proceed alongside with President Obama, the 111th Assembly of the U.S. Congress, and 21 other states, and quickly divest from Iran. And colleagues, this bill even becomes more important to me because I have a son who's serving in the armed services as well, who spent time actually in Iraq. And if you look up June 9th, 2007, Camp Bucca, you'll see where soldiers were coming from Iran into Iraq and lobbing mortars into a prison there. We lost U.S. soldiers in that prison. We lost a lot of prisoners that were in that prison that had came from other prisons, and it was one of the main sites. And it's something that will mark my son's life forever. And all of this was done with the funds and coming from Iran, where most of these soldiers were coming from. They were running back to Iran for cover. So this is a very personal issue for me as well, and every other parent who has a son in the military that has served in Iraq or overseas. So after my son's done 3 tours, suffers from some PTSD, this hits me very, very closely. I've had the opportunity to meet with the mayor of Itamar and his wife and listen to their struggles and what they go through with the terrorist organizations over there. And I feel their pain, and it's something that we don't really know and fully understand here in the United States. So I encourage you to look at this very, very seriously and not think of it just as an investment, but something that we're aiding in some of the terrorist activities, because when the money flows to Iran and Iran is making profits off of us, they're using that money to fund them. And we need to be one of the leaders in this. There's states, let's be the 23rd, and starts for the rest of the United States to start pulling any funds that are in that. I will turn it over to the Senate.
I think I'm going to pass to the House since I'm the I'll go last, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Representative Wally Hicks from Josephine County. I come here in support of House Bill 3333 for a number of reasons. The Iranian regime maintains diplomatic relations with every nation except for the United States and Israel. The regime has committed numerous human rights violations on its own populations and has long maintained ties to terrorist organizations violating the human rights of persons around the world. The Iranian regime has many times stated its devotion to developing self-sustaining nuclear capacity into a weapons program. The interfered in the war and the insurgency that have U.S. troops. In fact, on 25 December 2000, United States Armed Forces arrested 4 senior Iranian military officials in Baghdad on suspicion of aiding the insurgency. The British Sunday Times reported in September 5, 2010 that Iranian businesses are paying Taliban fighters $1,000 for each U.S. soldier they kill in Afghanistan and $6,000 for the destruction of each U.S. vehicle. Iran's weapon programs, not just nuclear but on down the line, regarding military equipment are self-sustaining within Iran. The UN embargo has prohibited most sales of weaponry to Iran, so the money that they make through their business enterprises goes directly into their weapons program. I come here as one of the 2 veterans of the Iraq War currently serving in the Oregon legislature. Senator Boquist and I are here together, who is the other veteran of the Iraq War, and I do want to impress the significance of that on the committee and my support of this bill for the reasons previously stated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Co-Chair Barnhart, Co-Chair Berger, distinguished members of the committee, I'm Senator Brian Boquist, 12th Senate District. It's 5 rural counties in the valley here, along with 6 voters in Lane County, and I'm also the chairman of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. Colleagues, was involved in the 05-07 Sudan divestiture bill that came out of both chambers. Several of you voted for that when it was passed. The argument back then was the state has a fiduciary responsibility we should not get involved in, and the second argument that was out there is it won't do any good. The fact of the matter is, from the fiduciary point of view, we haven't suffered any losses, as we did not suffer any losses during the apartheid issues that came through the legislature. And the next thing that comes out, the result in Sudan was actually a democratic election, and so far it is holding. So peace came about by the efforts of the states and the federal government combined. I would point out in the Iranian situation that we're facing right now, I actually carried a bill across one of the chambers to the second chamber, and we didn't get it passed. This bill is actually a much more permissive bill. It does have a latitude that gives more fiduciary responsibility options to the Treasurer and the Oregon Investment Council. Having said that, though, you're going to see testimony a little bit later in here that shows that of the top 6 invested companies we are in, they lost somewhere between 56% and 10% of their value. So if you happen to look at the news and you follow your stocks or your retirement accounts, you'll see every time something goes bad, the stock goes down. So there are those that have argued for multiple sessions the fiduciary responsibility is to pack up and get out because we're losing money. The other thing that's very interesting that you will see in testimony around here, which I intend once the Mad Week gets done this week and next week, is to go back and reread my Sudan report that you all received a copy of it, because about a third of the companies that are on our present investment list in Iran are on the Sudanese list where we're not supposed to be invested. And that is a much tighter bill that we passed out of this chamber. Like Representative Hicks here, I have actually been boots on the ground on both sides of Iran. I was boots on the ground in Sudan, and I had the distinguished pleasure to have mortar rounds dropped on top of me. So therefore, I'm quite attuned to the fact that 2 weeks ago, a whole series of mortar equipment and mortar rounds were captured again in Afghanistan that were being fired upon our troops. And when I say our troops, let us keep in mind that 13,000 members of the Oregon Army National Guard and Air Guard have been deployed in both of these places. So it is our fight. It is our responsibility. I hope this time, because I'll be blunt, it was that there's a companion bill just like this on our chamber that was killed, and I would hope that this one comes across the chamber, because there are bipartisan sponsors on our side, and if we get it in the right committee, we will work with the House and work with the Treasurer's office to push forward in this. But if you watch the 6 o'clock news, or CNN, or Fox News, or whatever you happen to watch, this is a issue that comes up every night. And I would appreciate your action. Very supportive of both of the representatives and be delighted to take questions. And I'm always open to spar with the Treasurer's office.
Or anybody else.
Thank you. And with that, we'll take questions. Representative Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. You mentioned, Senator Boquist, about the Sudanese divestiture that went through a few years ago and that we're currently still invested in that. Is that through direct holdings or through funds where outside money managers are doing it? How is that happening? That's a bit troubling if you believe we're out of compliance.
Co-Chair Barnhart, Co-Chair Berger, Vice Chair Brewer. What we have is there's a whole combination of those. And in the Sudan divestiture, one of the problems you have in these floating, as you said, different market areas and different places that we invest in different funds, is they buy and trade all the time. And so to the defense of the Treasurer, what you have to do is you kind of have to keep track of these, because many times they're 2, 3, or 4 tiers down. There are agreements, and then somebody makes a trade, and suddenly we end up with a small portion of our portfolio in these companies, and then we have to kind of identify it, and then we have to work backwards to come back out of it. Luckily so, it's a smaller amount than it ever has been in the past. But, I mean, the leading individual or the leading companies that we have problem with are, of course, the Chinese. Now, that shouldn't surprise anybody, but that's really the issue right there. And again, the Treasurer's Office and the Oregon Investment Council have been very responsive to that. It's when you identify it, you see it, and then you come back, because, again, you're talking about, as you know, portfolios that are billions and tens of billions of dollars, and then magically you find out we're back there, and they didn't even know. Because what we tried to do in the Sudan divestiture bill, and is in this particular bill, and it was in his companion's bill, is not to hold the Treasurer to a standard that you must absolutely ironclad do this, because you don't know in these trades what's going on. And it many times with lots of other areas in state government, some citizen notices this is, hey, you know, we're doing this and we're back there, and then we identify it, then we take it back in this case the Oregon Investment Council and the Treasurer, and then they look into it, and then they go back to the fund manager and say, hey, we're not supposed to be in there, and then we correct it. This is an ongoing. It's like any other government agency. You got to keep a very watchful eye on it.
One follow-up comment. Thank you for clarifying. I suspected that was it. It was more in the fund managers and trying to keep those funds pure, which is always a challenge. And I want to thank you both for your service and for your son's service as well.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you very much. I think you've staged the bill well. Appreciate it. Very.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Co-chairs.